last week during our Rants and Raves segment, I gave a rave for Fox News for moving Greg Gutfeld to a late-night time slot with his own show, titled simply Gutfeld. My rave was for a conservative alternative to the posse of late-night liberals. But that was before I actually saw the show. And while it's early, less than a week old, the reviews are less than stellar, for good reason. As of this week, the one-time comic and pundit is now, well, a certified comedian.
All right, brand new show and a brand new Greg. I'm as giddy as Kamala Harris explaining kids in cages.
Of the shows we sampled, Gutfeld was heavy on derision of the Biden administration and his late-night competition.
The definition of risk to Kimmel is dehydration from crying too much. Let's see what Brian Williams is up to right now.
Good evening, I'm Brian Williams, and I am on Mars.
Gutfeld offers a panel of guests, Eric Trump among the first.
Biden is boring as hell.
Yeah.
Kamala's nowhere to be found.
The show moves fast and there's lots of razzle-dazzle, but it's Gutfeld's humor that has drawn the sharp knives.
You can self-identify as a comedian without actually ever saying anything funny.
Comedy is really hard.
Yeah.
This was really terrible.
This show is what the kids would call giga cringe.
Actually, there were a couple of amusing segments, like one Gutfeld asked fellow Fox hosts to rate his first show.
What do you think so far of this show?
Look, it's your first show. I don't want to be, I don't want to be critical. I want to highlight the positives. I think there are some. There are some low points too, but
Gutfeld's ratings, though, were high. As the old saying goes, only time will tell. Except I'm not giving it any more.
That was a joke.
You know, Joanna, it is early, and I know people get crucified, right off the bat, so maybe in a few weeks it'll calm down. But, if he were more like, what's his name, Bill Maher, and just kind of was himself. Bill Maher was very much himself. But this idea that he has to be a comedian, I think that's where he's making the mistake. All these canned jokes. And by the way, the jokes are ancient in reference. The whole thing with Brian Williams was 10 years ago. He had a Woody Allen joke in there. Half the people weren't going to know what context it was. So, I mean, I think if he was just himself, did the interviews, but he's got to put on an act.
No, I mean, to be fair, comedy is hard, and I've watched Greg Gutfeld on The Five. He is a witty guy. And I've actually seen some bits that he did on his he had a middle of the night, like 3 a.m. show called Red Eye, and there's some bits that he did that were legitimately funny. I think what's happening here, and part of the problem is that really comedy, to be really good, most good comedy is dangerous, which means it's a little bit subversive, which means it's sort of it's playing with and kind of going up against the audience's expectations. And what he's doing at 11 on Fox is just preaching completely to the choir. I mean, these are all just really standard sort of Fox News and own the libs tropes. There's nothing unexpected or surprising about it. I mean, I would actually argue that a lot of the liberal comedians on late night talk show, the liberal-leaning sort of Colbert, even Jon Stewart types, got less funny during the Trump years for a similar reason. They were kind of doing rants against Trump that sort of had punchlines as opposed to true jokes. So it's the nature of the humor that's part of the problem.
I haven't done any reviews of comedy acts ever. But here it goes. I think this is a function of just comedy in general when you first start out. I recall Jay Leno. I used to watch all of these nighttime shows back in the day. Now I'm getting too old to stay up that late. But, having watched Jay Leno, I remember his first night, he was ripped for his comedy. He was described by other comedians as becoming corporate all of a sudden. He was praised for all of the acts that he would do when he was out on the road. And in fact, he continued to do those even when he was doing the Tonight Show. But when he took over initially, I mean, he was really panned by all the experts on comedy out there. And then over time, he really settled into that seat and became quite successful, as we know. So I think it's a little too early, really, to kind of slam the door on his comedy act. The other thing I would point out in terms of being, getting any kind of, attention or success focused on the more conservative kind of voice. Remember when Fox News Channel first was coming on board, people at CNN and elsewhere were saying, something like that's never going to find an audience. And it did.
True.
Well, I'll echo you, Emily, and say that for me, at least, I think it's time to slam the door on being interested in this, exploring the show as it develops. The point Joanna made about surprise is key. I'm guessing that if we got together and tried to write up a list of topics, maybe even jokes that would be told on the next episode of Gutfeld, we could probably predict exactly what he was going to say, what he was going to make jokes about. If you're not surprised, it's not funny. I know you weren't a big David Letterman fan. I was. You know, he would bring on Chris Elliott to pretend to be Marlon Brando for 10 straight minutes, and it was completely bizarre. There would have been no reason to expect it, and I found it hilarious. The other thing that makes me pained as I watch these Gutfeld clips is he looks so uncomfortable physically. And maybe I'm projecting that. Maybe he isn't, but he does not look like he's at ease. If the host is uncomfortable, then you're going to be uncomfortable watching.
Good point.
Yeah, I have to differ with a couple of you. I have never found Greg Gutfeld funny. I think he's about as funny as psoriasis, and psoriasis is not funny. But I think Joanna hit on an important issue here, which is right now, it's one thing if you've got a comic figure to play off of. Gerald Ford stumbling and tumbling, Donald Trump doing whatever. But you know what? The coronavirus isn't a laughing matter. The politics of this moment, by and large, are not funny. So you're left to tossing out the usual red meat, the own the lib stuff that I guess amuses Eric Trump, although he didn't look that amused in that clip you showed. But really, no one else. I predict a dire ratings future for Gutfeld.